Hang on a second. Thank you, everyone, for coming to IAC Public Speaking this evening. It's wonderful to see so many people here. So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today. I would also like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Today, the 1st of August, also marks 4-year anniversary of the ANU internal report into SASH on campus. And on this day, the Interhall Arts Committee would like to say that we stand with survivors, we see you, and we demand more action to be made by the ANU on this topic. So, my name's Shan. I'll be your attempted MC this evening. So the way the night's going to work, we're going to have 2 rounds. We're going to have the prepared speech round, and we're going to have the impro speech round. So we have 3 prompts and for the prepared round, and they are back in my day, we're nothing without the arts, and I am once again asking. So each of the speakers for the first round have to incorporate one of those prompts into their speech. We have 3 amazing judges from the ANU Toastmasters Association. We have Ian, Nicole, and Valerie. So let's give them a big hand for giving up their time to be here tonight. And speakers will be marked on matter, manner, audience reception, and the X factor. So audience reception, that one comes down to you. So if you feel like you're really enjoying a speech, let's make it obvious. You know, lots of clapping, lots of cheering, but not so much that you can't hear the speakers, ideally. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Melissa Lee from Burton and Garran Hall. Thank you.
This question raises a really important discussion about the social model of disability. I first came across the social model of disability when I was reading an article published by Jordan Steele-John on his social media. Jordan Steele-John was elected at 22 as the youngest senator in Australia. At 26, he is still the voice of young people and people with disabilities in Parliament. The social model of disability stipulates that disability arises from social, communicational, attitudinal, and physical barriers woven into the social fabric and institutions of our societies that prevent people living with impairments from fully participating in society. It then carries the implication that if we remove these barriers, people living with disabilities will be able to fully participate in our society on an equal basis. The most common implementation of the social model of disability is the use of ramps to access buildings for people with disabilities that impede on their impair their mobility. There's something key about Jordan Steele-John that I forgot to mention earlier, and that is that he uses a wheelchair. So I'd like you to imagine for a moment that Parliament House doesn't have ramps to access it. We'd be missing out on one of Australia's most tenacious young leaders who fights for the rights of youth and people with disability in Parliament every single day. And without that unique voice, we'd be missing out on a lot. So thank goodness for ramps, right? But there are other ways that we exclude people with disabilities in our society. The deaf and nonverbal community are systematically silenced by the inaccessibility of Auslan. Auslan is Australia's sign language, and it's spoken by over 20,000 people every single day. Auslan is its own language with a distinct culture, but it's also the most widely misunderstood language in the whole of Australia. That's 20,000 people who rely on the most widely misunderstood language as their primary form of their communication. So how do we fix this? Well, to access the building, we built a ramp. To access the language, we educate. If everyone could use sign language, by the social model of disability, mutism and deafness would become less of a disability, and these people would be able to participate in all the conversations across our society that happen on a day-to-day basis. Talking in a tube, ordering a coffee. These conversations are highly important to the social fabric, yet we exclude people every single day. So just learn Auslan, right? There's a slight problem with that. Access to Auslan education is extremely inaccessible. You'd be disappointed to hear that the ANU, despite offering 30 languages, doesn't offer Auslan. In fact, only 3 universities across the whole of Australia offer Auslan as a language to study alongside a primary degree. The alternative, you can fork out almost $8,000 to study a Cert 3 in Auslan. Clearly, tertiary education is geared towards careers, but not inclusion. But there is hope for our education system. Languages other than English in primary and secondary school are not only government funded, but are a compulsory facet of our primary education. Including Auslan as our standard language for languages other than English could be a huge step towards turning our social model of disability into a reality. Learning Auslan carries the original benefits of learning a language other than English, as well as new benefits from learning a tactile language, as well as increased communicational capacity for children, especially when talking about issues that are difficult to verbalise, such as big feelings. Introducing Auslan into our schools weaves inclusivity into the social fabric and already existing social institutions. Our students that learn Auslan in their schools one day become baristas, paramedics, firefighters, and young leaders. And these are people who will then know the basics of Auslan for when it matters most. Not educating our students and our people of Australia in Auslan can lead to excluding people who rely on Auslan as their primary form of communication from important discussions. These discussions are often led by questions. Tonight I began my speech with a question. This question was to invite you into a conversation, but how can you accept it and join the discussion without being able to access the language? So to invite you back into our discussion, I'm once again asking, if we all learned Auslan at school, would deafness and mutism still be considered disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Okay, our next speaker from Wright Hall is Holly Johnson. Let's welcome her.
Back in my day, the phrase your dad utters when you complain about your internet connection cutting out in the finale of Love Island, and that your grandpa uses when he tells you elaborate stories of how they used to hike through sludge and over mountains and through an ocean, a quick boat ride, a marathon, just to get to school. With 4 words, your struggle is belittled, even if that struggle is as small as Greg and Amber winning the season 5 finale of Love Island, when it should have been Tommy and Molly. Sorry, I'm still not over it. But it could also be something much bigger, something you're genuinely struggling with. The truth is that those 4 words can hurt. I don't need to give you another lecture about the hard world that us youngins face with the highs and lows of social media, the information overload we're subject to, an ever-heating globe, the rise of fascism, But to the boomers, we have it easy. And I get it, I do. I called my grandma the other day on the verge of tears because good old Chartwell's, that's our hall's catering company, was somehow combining the mac and cheese from lunch and the lamb from last night into coconut noodles for dinner. And I missed her cooking. Now, this woman who I'm complaining to about noodles escaped Nazi-occupied Norway when she was 5, and her dad was the most wanted man in the country. And I'm here complaining to her about noodles that have been prepared to me by someone. It's a tricky line to walk. We know our pain is real. We know this year hasn't been easy for us, losing a year and potentially many more of our youth to a virus and the many struggles young people face, personally and as a collective. They're real and they're justified, even if other generations and individuals have been through an event that is objectively worse. I like to say, if you feel something, that means it's true, even if it logically doesn't make sense or can seem small in retrospect. Despite us knowing something is hard for us and often rolling our eyes when these 4 words are said to us, as a young person in this lucky country, I do often think that I have it easier than other people in the years before me. But that discreditation can sometimes make the struggle worse. You feel as though your pain is not worth the same. But despite all that those 4 words have made me feel, and that I'm sure you have all also felt, what goes around comes around. We know that we will utter those same 4 words to future generations. That is, if we as a society don't make ourselves extinct first, we'll sigh at the technology that makes their lives easier. I'm sure we'll constantly complain about COVID. Who knows, some of us may even turn into weird fascists. I really hope nobody does, but there's a chance. But whilst, yes, those 4 words are often used to devalue struggles, we use them to reflect on the good and to be nostalgic as well, of a pretty strange, often great time to grow up and exist. We'll say, back in my day, gay marriage was legalized. Equally as important, back in my day, Lady Gaga wore a meat dress. Back in my day, Emma McKeon won the most medals of any woman in a single Olympics. That happened today, pretty cool. Back in my day, the Me Too and Time's Up movements happened. Something I'm really personally grateful for, back in my day, One Direction existed. Back in my day, more women were in positions of power than ever before, with female leaders doubling since the start of the century. And finally, to bring it back full circle, back in my day, there was this really cool TV show called Love Island. Thank you.
Okay, so we have some speakers. I'm just going to expose them in the prep room crying out for water. So I'm just going to take a brief break to supply them with some water. In the meantime, just to let you guys know, in terms of if you need to go to the bathroom, there is an exit that way. So down that way, the end. And then if you go out through that sliding door, then there'll be some bathrooms on the right. At least one of them is propped open. So if you need to go, please try and just wait until the end of people's speeches before you get up. Secondly, the Ursula Hall canteen will be opening at, what time would that be? At 7:45. So we'll have a little break in between the 2 rounds, and feel free to buy something or buy something in between speeches. Sorry, one moment. Yeah, so our next speaker will actually be joining us from Zoom. And we'd just like everyone to show special appreciation for people who can't be with us here in person because of the current pandemic. And I just think it's really awesome that we're able to have people joining us despite that. So a special round of applause at the end for Alicia. Not just yet, thanks Liam, I appreciate your enthusiasm. And also for a couple of other speakers who'll be joining us later this evening. Okay. Yeah, all right, I've stalled for long enough. I think we can put Alicia on, so let's everyone give a hand for Alicia.
Being back home for such an extended period of time has given me a new perspective on the college experience. with the various habits that have stuck with me from college really highlighting the little things we just accept as being a normal part of life there. It took a couple of weeks to stop feeling the urge to take my ID card with me to the bathroom and to stop waking up with hash browns on my mind on Tuesdays and Fridays, the superior days for breakfast at Ursie's, FYI. But it was the feeling hungry at 5:30 p.m. that I still haven't been able to shake. This isn't normal, not for the under 70 age group at least. Really, the only place that dinner at this time would be acceptable is, well, a nursing home. And this got me thinking. Between the early dinners and the frequent crafting sessions, the life of a college student seems pretty similar to that of a geriatric. I've had conversations with friends about this over our really very early dinner, but lockdown has given me time to really reflect and refine my argument. And so I am once again asking myself, and in turn you all, to consider if there are really any differences between a residential hall and a nursing home. Let's start with the basic principle of what makes a residential hall: the people. Residential halls are a melting pot of different individuals. Many of us come from different places, such as North Sydney, Eastern Sydney, and Northeastern Sydney, and choose to stay at college to make new friends to accompany us on this new part of our lives. In the same way your parents might have sent your grandparents to a nursing home when they grew tired of looking after them, many parents send their kids away to college for exactly the same reason. Think about it now. Did your parents strongly encourage you to move away from home? Tell you living on campus was a quintessential life experience? I'm sure they told your grandparents the same thing. And let's be realistic. Old people and uni students even dress the same. How many of you can honestly say you've never gone to breakfast in a form of pajamas? And like the elderly, college students prefer easy to put on footwear, such as Birkenstocks, Ugg boots, and slippers. Both nursing homes and residential halls are also rife with bedroom excitement because, as I'm sure you know, oldies like to get it on, and UG students do too. Then there's the reality of what life at a residential hall actually entails. Meal times, for example, the point that started my pondering. At Ursie's, dinner starts at 5:30, and I know it's the same for you guys at Bruce too. Now, though each meal finishes at 7 and 8 respectively, from my experience, the queue starts early and stomachs are already rumbling by 5 p.m. According to amerisleep.com, the superior website for all information about sleep and not just the first one on my Google search, the best time to have dinner is 3 hours before bed. So really, with meals at 5:30, we are being set up to be well asleep by 9 p.m. Add into that noise curfew, and we basically have a subliminally enforced bedtime. And of course, the excursions. I'm sure we're all familiar with the scene of a minibus full of seniors pulling up to the local shopping centre and a variety of walking sticks and frames descending upon the crowds. This scene is eerily similar to that of the Ursies and B&G minibus pulling up to Majura Park, Belco, or Gungahlin. Like the elderly, we like to go on walks, see the attractions of Canberra. And that isn't unreasonable. But again, like at nursing homes, these trips are carefully planned to add some interest to our days. And who could forget the crafting sessions? It's all too common to see a variety of knitters, crocheters, and artists in the common room each afternoon. And of course, there's the mug painting, tie dye, and drawing during O Week. But the most important factor, and admittedly the one that best applies to good old Ursula, because we are far superior to all the other halls when it comes to this, is our extraordinary passion for lawn bowls. Yes, like a nursing home, few sports garner as many supporters as the Term 1 Lawn Bowls Championship. And if that isn't a clear sign we aren't all oldies in the bodies of youth, I don't know what is. Nursing homes and residential halls are identical entities. Between the mealtimes, activities, and dressing habits, it is clear we have more in common than not. Though there is one key difference I haven't mentioned yet, and I'll leave it with you to ponder further. Residential halls have ex-resis, and for obvious reasons, nursing homes do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, that was a really excellent speech. Particularly enjoyed the lawn bowls bit. Up the Ursula Hall. All right, so our next speaker is Will Sheehy from John's 23. Let's give him a bit of a hand.
The present. Now, you may have seen the people before me had these little bit their phones and pieces of paper because you see, they'd prepared speeches. They're what we call nerds. So I decided to take the topic of we are nothing without the arts because, well, it's true, isn't it? If you look at the question of, well, what we are, there's the very simple answer of humans, animals, something, but let's be real here. What makes us us is not just that we live, that we exist, that we walk and breathe. No. What makes us us is, well, the art. It's our ability to see something that is and see something more than that. It's looking at a canvas, a painting, and seeing not a splash of colour, not someone throwing some ink on a bit of board. Well, we see artwork. We see something that inspires emotions, that inspires maybe fear, maybe memories. We see something and we see more than just that something. And that's what art is. It's looking at the world and seeing what could be, what you'd like there to be. And I suppose that's why we are nothing without the arts, because every animal has certain things. Every animal thinks. Descartes once said, I think, therefore I am, and lovely bloke, I'm sure, but I'd say it's how we think that makes us us. Every animal wants shelter, wants food, wants water, lives day to day for these things, but people aren't so simple, as I'm sure you've realized over your 18 years. We have ambitions, aspirations, we have dreams, we have things we'd like to do which don't fit in that neat little paradigm of food, water, survival, the needs. We have wants. We have the ability to look at life as not a journey of survival alone and see it as life, see it as something worth living, as seeing each day not as another day of survival, as much as unis might make that feel, but as seeing each day as an adventure, as something to inspire more than just waiting for your meals and waiting to go to bed, rinse and repeat. The arts are so much more than just, well, artwork. It's not just your paintings, it's not just that. I'm sure if you were to ask, if they're here, people who like, rugby, I guess, that barbarian sport. And I'm sure for whatever reason, when they look at that pitch and a bunch of guys and gals ramming into each other, that's not what they see. Although, as a Melburnian, I disagree. No, they see people with passion. They see a greater thing. They don't see people running at each other. They see a sport. They see the hopes and dreams of one team. They see teamwork. They see collaboration. And that's art, isn't it? That's something that is being transformed into something more. That's people working together to create something that inspires emotion and passions and feelings and everything that makes us us and not just an animal, not just an ape, into practicality. And that's art, isn't it? And I'm sure if you were to ask ANU's rugby team, they'd say we're nothing without them, so... Because at the end of the day, well, what are we? Nothing really, unless you add in those spices, unless you add in those extra parts, unless you add in university, unless you add in higher education, unless you add in dreams, wants, etc., without trying to repeat myself, unless you add in art. Because, well, at the end of the day, we really are nothing without the arts.
It's on. Okay. So our next speaker is from the illustrious Interhall, and her name is Rosie. Let's give her a nice warm welcome.
Still going. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in right now? It's 7 p.m. I have to be at work in approximately 11 hours. Bleary-eyed, I stare at the receptionist, unable to form proper sentences. She grimaces and scribbles down a 10. It's approximately 1 month into the first semester of university ever, and I've found myself in the emergency room again, alone. It felt somehow embarrassing to admit that something as monotonous as a period had resulted in a late-night hospital trip, so I'd called myself an Uber. Sitting in the car, vision blurry, I'm still second-guessing my decision. This feels like overreacting. I should probably just go back, get over it. As I walk into the emergency room, let me correct myself. As I hobble into the emergency room, I'm still trying to talk myself down. Women get cramps all the time. Just get over it. Go home. And then I fainted. So as I come to, surrounded by nurses, I think at 7 p.m. on a random Tuesday night, the first semester of university ever, alone, maybe, just maybe, the ER is the right place to be. The rest of my late night escapades in Calvary ER are unfortunately anticlimactic. Your file says endometriosis, painful periods. Are you experiencing the usual symptoms? Chronic menstrual pain, back pain, dizziness? Well, yes, obviously. Well, that explains the fainting and the discomfort. I sense the same monotonous, unfortunate, and very unhelpful conversation that I've had multiple times. I find myself once again asking, is there anything you can do to help? Sorry, love, you're just gonna have to wait for the pain meds to kick in. Great. I call another Uber, make my way back to my room, and I don't get to work in the morning. A couple of weeks later, I'm in a philosophy tute, and I'm finding myself growing increasingly frustrated at a conversation that I'm having with 4 of my male peers about the magic of modern medicine and how we should feel fulfilled, blessed, eternally grateful that our lives are secured by modern science. For God's sake, I felt like yelling, I'm so glad that that's working out for you, but how have we come this far and yet the only options I've been offered to treat endometriosis are an incredibly invasive surgery that often results in a lack of ability to have a child, or on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and a genuinely hilarious thing to offer to a 19-year-old university student, simply fall pregnant. I want to know. I need to know. Where is the research? Where are the solutions that don't result in a child or lack thereof? Why is it that I'm still ending up in emergency care the night before important exams and 8-hour shifts? The experience of being diagnosed with a chronic menstrual pain condition has felt like I've been tossed into a limbo of half-assed knowledge aimed solely at getting me out of the hospital bed. It feels ridiculous. So I am once again asking for some kind of attention, funding, education, just basic compassion to be granted towards women's health issues. For the days spent bedridden, because the pain doesn't just start in the abdomen, it sinks down your legs and it creeps up your spine. I'm asking for some public funding to women's health because the lack of research into endometriosis is quite literally painful. At this point, I feel like it's important to contextualize. Endometriosis is as common as asthma or diabetes. It affects 1 in 10 Australian women, yet it takes 7 years to diagnose. It's shocking that only 2.5% of publicly funded medical research goes towards women's health issues. I am once again asking that women are included in medical science. I'm once again asking for the mere possibility of existing without debilitating pain. And it feels so horrible to have to keep asking, keep begging for this. It feels like no one's listening. It feels like no one wants to hear it. Endometriosis is a silent issue. As women, we accept pain and we're taught to deal with it. You're so brave. I don't feel brave. I feel trapped in my body. You'll be stronger for it. I don't want to be stronger. I shouldn't have to be. Women's health should be granted the dignity of funding, focus, and research. So I am once again asking, is there anything we can do to help? Thank you.
Amazing. Our next speaker is Alex Heed from Interhall.
I'd like to say I don't have my glasses, so this is going to be a bit of a challenge. Okay, arts is the lifeblood of humanity's enduring existence. The great polymath Oscar Wilde once reflected on his deathbed, "It is through art and only through art can we realise the perfection as a society." Think that the arts, being every book, song, film, play, or piece of art, is the legacy of humanity through every generation. The art shows humans' involvement and understanding of the human condition throughout time. It equates to a good and happy life, if perceived correctly. A sense of love, lust, and a sense of justice is not found within the works of a mathematical equation. I can assure you that everything I value in my life, every emotion I have experienced, has been taught to me through the arts and their platforms. For me, music and art has moved me. It educated me about the suffering and the joy in the world and has made me a more compassionate person today. And it will continue to do so, at least I hope. It is no exaggeration to say that all forms of education stem from the arts. Intellect is derived from the appreciation of the arts. The arts help us to understand not only ourselves, but the human condition, what it means to live, what it means to be in pain, and what it means to have suffrage in one's life. It is by its very nature the lifeblood of the human existence. It is how humans empathise and educate with each other. If we do not have the arts, we have no understanding of the world around us. We cannot see the beauty in the world. We cannot reflect on past times. We cannot have compassion for those less fortunate, and we cannot prevent challenges of the future. We have no sense of justice, and we have no sense of our morality. Famed Australian artist John Brack painted his career-defining painting Collins Street at 5 p.m. in 1955, where he depicted a society of individuals who live a mundane approach to life. They cannot express themselves nor their individuality. They live for the sake of job security and earning their wages, and the desire to be one of the same. To this day, it's one of the most fear-mongering paintings in the world, and it is exactly because people underappreciate art that it is so fearful. It is wrong and a mistake for those nowadays who think that because one does not possess the artistic or creative talent that an artist does, the arts are not for them. The education that comes from the arts are individual, personal, emotional, and life-lasting. Our lives are an enduring education, and we make our choices in the hopes of achieving what we truly desire, whether that be fame, wealth, credit, or love. There is no doubt that with these ambitions and goals in our lives, they are desired from the arts. When a person aims to be loved, are they not just basing that love off William Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet? When a person aims to be wealthy, are they not basing that off the success of Jay Gatsby? When a person aims for academic credit or academic rigor, are they not basing it off Ron Howard's wonderful film, A Beautiful Mind? Our desires stem from the arts and their depictions. Whether you like it or not, this very building demonstrates the art. An architect had a vision created from the arts in which he is built on. Like holding your sorry. Whether you like it or not, the arts are all around us. It breathes on us, the ability to educate about us, about the human condition, and about moments in life that are ever so precious. Like holding a baby for the first time in a hospital, the sentimental Sinatra or Nat King Cole song that's sang when you first met your partner, or holding the hand of your loved one before they pass. The arts enables us to have these rare and beautiful feelings and memories, and when we are inevitably unable to articulate them justly, the arts provide us an avenue to do so. There is great beauty in the world, and it can only be seen if one appreciates the arts, as the arts foster our emotional intellect. For a life without arts at all, there is worse than a fate than death. And it is not hyperbolic to say, as what I have said. We live in an artistically sophisticated society, fostered from the arts, and if it is struck from us, which STEM subjects aim to do, then we as mortal humans have nothing to feel or live for. If we do not have the arts, if we do not value the arts, we have nothing, we possess nothing, and we can give nothing to humanity's great enduring legacy. You're welcome.
Well, I'd just like to say, I think Ursula Hall in particular, I hope you all took spent a lot of time taking in the architectural beauty of this building as you entered here this evening. I think the asbestos in particular really tops off the whole, the vision, as it were. Now, our next speaker, I can only remember their last name at the moment for reasons that will become obvious. Yes, we have Hugh Tuckwell from Griffin Hall. Thank you.
All good? When you hear someone start a sentence with the words, "back in my day," a few things may come to mind. You may think of a joke from the standpoint of a child or a teenager, defiant mockery, a joke to jab at the old. Or you may think of a lesson coming from a parent or teacher, a reminder of the fortunate position that the listener may hold. And you are just as likely to think of neither. But whatever came to your mind first will have come because of the perspective of the world that you have at this point in your life. As we go through life and experience different things, our point of view and opinions change. Our taste in music, food, friends, our morals, and our reactions. No one has had or will ever have the exact same experience that you will. Let's try and demonstrate this. Picture a child, around 12 years old. They've just come home from a long day of learning at school. They may have had a test or gotten a lot of homework, but they just want to spend their afternoon playing games or relaxing. Suddenly, one of their parents comes in. Can you clean your room and take out the bins? Frustrated by this, they snap back. Do I have to? The child expects the parent to reconsider. Instead, the parent snaps back. Back in my day, we didn't talk back to our parents. And the breaking point is reached. In a sing-song whine, the child repeats the phrase, right back. Back in my day, we didn't talk back to our parents. An argument ensues. Why would you ask me to do that? You don't know what kind of day I've had. I go to school to do work. I'm meant to come home and relax. Isn't it your job to take care of me? I'm a child, and it's your house after all. You just don't understand. But are they meant to? Is it justified for this child to react as they did, to retaliate in this way? They don't know the reasoning for their parent to ask them to do these tasks or what kind of day their parent has had. Why should they expect them to suddenly reconsider what they are asking? Is it right for them to think of their parents' role as this? It depends on your perspective. Let's now view the scenario from the position of the parent to this child. They've had a long day at work, and have come home just wanting to rest, maybe watch some Netflix, but they can't yet. There's housework to do. They go to their child, and in an attempt to lighten the load, they ask them to perform a few simple tasks. It will help them. Can you clean your room and take out the bins? But to their surprise, the child fires back a sarcastic remark. Do I have to? Understandably, they get upset. Back in my day, we didn't talk back to our parents. And then the child has the audacity to repeat the phrase. Back in my day, we didn't talk back to our parents. And the following argument ensues yet again. How dare you speak to me like that? I don't deserve this kind of treatment. I work long days so that you can go to school, get a good education, and spend time with your friends. The least you can do is a few short chores. You don't know what it's like to raise a child or to pay a mortgage. The sacrifices I make. How can you be so ungrateful? You just don't understand. Of course, this example is incredibly limited. It could have gone so many different directions. Either person could have had a better day or a worse day. They could have said one word differently that would end up changing the direction of the interaction. A simple please or thank you, for example. It makes leaps in logic, assuming a lot about the child and the parent, even going as far to say that both sides say the phrase, back in my day, we listened to our parents, and that there was a response that was the exact same phrase, and they were both said in a somewhat condescending tone. And it's also both their breaking points. I am almost certain that if anyone listening was blindly placed into this scenario on either side, the outcome would never be exactly the same. But that is why it works well as a demonstration of the effect of perspective. Neither side does truly understand. And that's okay. That's human. No one will ever interpret this speech the same way. Should you agree with me? Is there a point to this? I don't think so. But what do I know? That's just my perspective, and you're entitled to yours.
Okay. So, exciting news. The Ursula Hall canteen is raising its grill as we speak. If you would like to avail yourself of a snack and or a drink, please feel free, but please also do not make excessive noise. Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker will be joining us via Zoom, and his name is William Adams of Bergman. Let's make him welcome.
Thank you very much. Do I go when I'm ready? Hello? Hello? Are we good? Yeah, okay. There is a certain tension between what might be termed the artistic world and our government of the day. Conservative contempt for liberal and permissive expression is not new, and I don't believe it will be any surprise to those listening that the reactionary impulses of our current representative body can be placed within a long and storied tradition of attempted frustrations. The reorganization of the fee structure at our higher education institutions is perhaps the most recent expression of this trend, and one with which some of you should be intimately familiar. A cynical view of the policy change holds that increases that amount to a doubling of the payment due on art courses is nothing more than a spiteful retribution against disciplines that are often seen within conservative circles as challenging the existing order. A yet more insidious interpretation holds that this is a concerted attempt to limit the potential of critical thinking skills within a class of people most likely to oppose the current government. This brings us naturally to the point. We are nothing without the arts. There is a tendency within the sciences, law and business, and certainly I have been guilty of this, to ascribe a certain uselessness to a traditional arts education. This is not to bash the sciences. An empirical understanding of the world is beyond important. Understanding questions such as what is and what is possible has been at the backbone of human society for millennia. However, normative questions are important as well, questions of value, of what should be in addition to what is. If the sciences drive our progress, then arts have given it direction. This can be illustrated in an examination of what art actually is. For the purposes of brevity, I shall center my discussion on the visual arts, but I believe the point is relevant in a broader sense. Some consider art to be representation, though in my opinion, this is both too broad and too narrow. Too broad in the sense that it could include superfluous distractions, such as the simple selfie, and too narrow in that it has the potential to exclude art that attacks the very nature of representation itself. Instead, I would posit that art is fundamentally a mediated perspective. By this, I mean the work viewed provides a lens through which to perceive the world. It forces us to see our environment from a different point of view. To put it in layman's terms, art is about making a point. This is a problem for a government of conservative disposition. Conservatism, by its nature, wishes to conserve, to maintain the status quo. Little of the points made by art support the status quo. In fact, it is quite obvious to say they are often placed directly in opposition. The famous Singer Sargent portrait, Madame X, proved such a scandal upon its unveiling that its creator was forced to leave Paris in disgrace and its subject was ostracized in high society. Its crime? The portrayal of female sexuality by means of a single strap falling from the shoulder of a dress. Never mind he repainted the strap into a more secure position. Never mind the figure's perfect contrapposto. Never mind the intense contrast of aristocratic pallor, the dark background, and never mind the unconventional beauty of the subject that made it a truly compelling composition. It showed a lens of femininity that ran slightly against the grain of a zeitgeist, and it was promptly condemned. This painting, by the way, is not what you'd consider a groundbreaking feminist masterpiece. To our modern taste, it would seem quite reserved. It is, however, strikingly beautiful. This beauty is important, certainly. The romantic appreciation of the sublime can teach us about our relationship with nature. Classicism articulates perfect proportionality, and through Cubist works, we can deconstruct our environment. But beyond purely aesthetic sensibilities, we require art because it shows us the potential for a new and better world. Each movement goes beyond the rather asinine proposition of mere differing styles. Beneath the facades, there are unique philosophical groundings which seek to help interpret the world around us, to help us strive towards an ideal. Slowly, the wheels of progress grind forwards. The arts may not keep the wheels in motion, but they do help point the way. We must keep the critical perspectives shown to us as sacred, because the more people that can view the world critically, the better. In times like this, we need great works of art, literature, and music that challenge this world of which many of us take measure and find wanting. Not only do we need people who attain great feats in this respect, but we also require people to understand their complexities, to engage with the work beyond the level of pure aesthetic appreciation. Without this, without the arts, we are a society condemned to blindness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William, for that a very illuminating speech. Our next... Okay. So we're just going to wait a couple of seconds, technical difficulties, but I'd also just like to say that I think the Zoom has gone really well tonight, and I'm really appreciative to everyone running it, our amazing technical team. I'm just going to take this juncture to tell everyone to give a hand to the technical team. Oh, and we have our speaker. So this is Sitara Uthaya Kumaran. I hope I pronounced your name properly. She's from Bruce Hall.
If you were living in Sydney lockdown with all the arts events and venues shut down, you would need absolutely no convincing that life without the arts reduces us to nothing. Reflecting on better times, in 2019, my family and I watched a play called Counting and Cracking as part of the Sydney Festival. It was about the Sri Lankan Civil War, told from the position of a Tamil family, but acknowledged other perspectives as well of the same conflict. It was about the 1983 racial riots which killed 2,000 Tamil civilians. The staging and performance were incredible. The stage setting was fabulous as it essentially recreated a Sri Lankan village inside the Sydney Town Hall and had a stellar cast with actors from more than 3 different countries. The play went on to win many awards, including the 2020 New South Wales Premier's Literary Award. But there was something more. Included in the price of the ticket was an exotic Sri Lankan meal. even though the food looked more Indian. People were given food at the entrance, which they took in and ate as they enjoyed the play. More food was served during the interval just before the play reached its climax. Well, most of the audience seemed to have enjoyed the experience, but not my parents. Both my parents were deeply affected by the civil war in Sri Lanka, going through horrors that many of us born here cannot even comprehend. They lost people they loved, were forced into situations which they should not have been in, and lived in a state of constant fear. And for them, there was something not quite right about watching a play about their trauma in a setting where it was acceptable for people to eat not even Sri Lankan but Indian food and believe that it somehow enriched the experience and understanding of the trauma of that war. Imagine watching the horrors of the Siberian gulags while enjoying Russian borscht, or watching the horrors of the Auschwitz concentration camp while eating sauerkraut. Yes, we can all see how offensive this would be. So why wouldn't serving curry while people watch a play about a Sri Lankan massacre be any different? Why did the producers of the play serve food? Was it because food has become that perennial migrant offering, perhaps the only lens through which Australian audiences would see another culture? Or was there a more subtle, deeper, perhaps unconscious reason behind it? The food gave people a place to escape when the truth became too hard, a way to hide in a familiar and enjoyable place while still somehow convincing them that they were absorbing a Sri Lankan horror. The harsh realities of a Sri Lankan massacre had to be packaged for an Australian audience. It helped reduce a violent and traumatic experience to a pleasant afternoon at the theatre. There was a sense of reality being suspended. But why is this so? After all, isn't it the very function of art to hold a mirror to society, to be a vehicle for truth? Isn't the purpose of art to connect us with experiences in a deeper and authentic way? Last year, the world watched in shell-shocked horror as the confronting, unedited images of the brutal murder of George Floyd circulated around the globe. But these didn't remain mere images on screens. They led to the world springing into action. On the other hand, the Sydney Festival play, a piece of high art, was guilty of packaging the truth. One of the many things that the weeks following the murder of George Floyd showed us was the power that a true story unflinchingly can have. The tendency to package experiences to be acceptable is now beginning to permeate art as well. However, this was not always the case. History is replete with examples of controversial art. Even contemporary artist Banksy unapologetically creates art with the intention to offend institutions he believes commit injustice. However, does the success of the play Counting and Cracking that wrapped the horrors of the 1983 racial riots of Sri Lanka in a masquerade of food and pleasantries suggest the beginning of a dangerous new phase in Australian art? The 17-year-old girl who posted the video of the murder of George Floyd on the internet was not looking for acceptance. If a direct message on social media can have such an impact, shouldn't reflexive high art go even further by connecting us to experiences way outside of our own, in a deeper way, by taking us behind surfaces into people's minds, exploring why people do what they do? But art that does not do that reduces us to nothing. So when you next create a work of art, please remember the truth need not be packaged. It can stand on its own. Thank you.
Amazing. So, our final speaker for the prepared round is Jeremy Butler from Uni Lodge. Before we welcome him on stage, I'd like to ask the Burton and Garron improvised speaker to go to the preparation room. I'd like to ask the Wright and Johns improvised speaker to go to the first waiting room. All right. So, let's give it up for Jeremy from Uni Lodge.
smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to ask for it. Thought-provoking, managing control of the situation, problem-solving, deeper understandings. Questioning is a skill that cannot be seen as a detriment, but should be utilized within all aspects of life. Gathering information is a basic human activity which we should use to learn, solve problems, aid our decisions, and understand each other more clearly. Questioning is the key to gaining more information and a stronger insight into various topics and situations. It is fundamental to successful communication, where we utilize it to engage others in conversation and develop critical thinking. The art of questioning poses information in various situations in your life. People are often successful based on their questioning skills, asking the right questions at the right time and answering it or not appropriately. At work, asking open and closed-ended questions can help you clarify a customer's needs and wants a lot faster. It's a tool you can use to work to a higher standard. It helps you uncover the challenges you're facing and generate better solutions to solve these problems. If you're asking a question, you're not rushing in to provide the answer. Give the solution or take on the challenge. It's a good self-management tool to keep you focused on the bigger picture. Questions are used in discussions in our day-to-day lives and are easily incorporated into any conversation. According to Edgar and Paul, questioning is a skill that is crucial as it can be used as a mechanism to put others on defense, strive to demonstrate a specific level of understanding, define tasks, express problems, and delineate issues. This is becoming more and more recognized in schools and organizations. There are non-profit organizations like the Right Question Institute that deliberately focus on inquiry skills, self-advocacy, and active citizenship participation in democracy. They believe that people need to be able to ask their own questions, as they are not motivated to take their own leadership, motivated to learn, to make responsibility for their actions. Our desire to question is innate and needs to be preserved and nurtured, starting from the beginning. Children naturally question the causes behind everything that they see. Before we are done explaining why the grass is green or why the sky is blue, our children are ready to inquire into the deepest mysteries of life, the mind, space, time. This is the time where we need to attack this skill. We need to utilize childhood curiosity and break the culture of feeding people the answers to questions they never asked. But what can the power of questioning actually do? It's important to recognize that questioning doesn't just lie within the realms of asking simple questions like, how are you? What are you doing? What are you up to? But it's so much deeper than that. Hal Gregerson, executive director of the MIT Leadership Council, pointed out that asking difficult questions is essential in today's world, where globalization, digitalization, and disruption can push leaders to the edge of uncertainty and force them to figure out what they don't know from what they don't know. It's how you increase the capacity and the potential in those you lead. Leaders should use this skill to ask powerful and inspiring questions. It may come across as them not having the answers or not knowing what they are doing, but I think it rather creates a vulnerability that allows others to see this as trusting. Asking for help and questions is a strong signal for others to see you're reaching out, and in turn makes you trust them too. A good question can lead into further thought and refinement of ideas, creating innovation and growth. This skill of asking questions is the very thing that can change social norms and create systematic disruption. A classic example is Nelson Mandela. He directed a campaign of peaceful, non-violent defiance against the South African government and its racist policies. He questioned the current system and created an environment where all can flourish, regardless of race, color, religion, gender, class, or any other social markers or difference. Questioning is powerful because it can create change. We're all spending too much time and energy solving challenges within the first idea we have. That's both limiting and counterproductive. We need to develop this skill where we can have a positive influence on society and the people around us. Make a difference, learn, be curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Be known to question and challenge people and topics. Be known as that person who is once again asking questions. Questioning is not a weakness, but it's your greatest attribute. Utilize it.
Amazing. So that concludes the prepared round. I'd like to ask all the rest of the improv speakers to now go to the first waiting room. Everyone else, feel free to get up, stretch your legs, buy something from the canteen. But please be seated again in 10 minutes so we can start promptly. India Sheed, where are you? Thank you. Thank you for bearing with my very shrill tones. So, the impromptu round. The speakers have been given the topic in a prep room. They have 10 minutes to put together a speech, and then they just have to come up and deliver it. 3 minutes long. I'm not going to tell you what the prompt is. You're going to have to figure it out. If they do a good job, then you should know what it is. Okay, so our first speaker from Burton and Garran Hall is Sophie Felice.
Laugh if you want to, but I had my first kiss at 18. Yep, I had graduated from high school, I was out in the adult world, allegedly, I was drinking, and I had never been kissed. Okay, it's a bit embarrassing. But I went to a small girls' school. I was literally voted the biggest teacher's pet at the end of high school, true story. And if the public speaking wasn't a dead giveaway, I was a bit of a nerd in high school. Shock horror. So like I said, I went to a girls' school, and where, in terms of my first kiss and, or more importantly, all the fun I've had since then, those things weren't really discussed. I recently had coffee with two of the girls I went to school with, and though we look back on high school really fondly, we had a great experience and we were really well educated, we talked about how incredibly failed we were by our school, by our sex ed. And really, regardless of when you started having sex, how many of us started and felt so lost? We had no knowledge. What were we actually armed with? Well, you could go to WebMD, convince yourself you had chlamydia, and just work yourself into a state of extreme panic. I'm sure we've all been there before. It's good fun. You could talk to your parents. That's not at all awkward. Hey, mum and dad, how's your day been? So I want to go on the pill. What do you think about that, fam? Not going to go down well. Or we could talk to our mates, which, much like a fiction after party, is the blind leading the blind. It's not going to end well. Our education towards sex has to be more thorough, has to be more holistic, and actually has to deal with the real bumps and humps that happen when we have sex. And I'm not just talking about don't have sex or you will get pregnant and die. That's not helpful. We need to be talking about what actually happens when we go on birth control. What are our birth control options? What does queer sex look like? What does it mean when you actually have your first time to you? What is the emotional implication of that? Those are the conversations I was never taught. I was taught how to not get pregnant to maintain the image of my wonderful Baptist school. So if I could go back in time, I would tell myself some of the stuff I had to learn, pardon the expression, but the hard way. Thank you.
Okay, we're actually on like a super precise timing schedule. So we're just going to wait like 40 seconds and then I'm going to bring in the next speaker. So if anyone wants to quickly duck up and grab something from the canteen, feel free. I lied, it was substantially less than 40 seconds. All right, our next speaker from Wright Hall is Suradip Paul.
I'll start with the prompt. The prompt was if I could go back in time. And I'll explain to you what my response to this is. My response to this is I would not. And throughout my speech, I will convince you why not. The first thing that came up to my mind when I got this prompt, I swear to God, was this. To stop the biggest catastrophe that ever happened to humanity, World War II. So kill adolescent Hitler. Which is like one of the biggest philosophical questions, right? If you have a time machine, do you go and kill baby Hitler? Then I realized you could stop a genocide. Even if you look at the Indian subcontinent, you could stop a famine from happening because that's all the knock-on effects that happened from World War II. But then the question is, if I did stop that, would I still have changed the sort of fascist elements within German society? No. Would I still have stopped the fact that there were people in the world who really, really wanted to go to war somehow? No. World War II, if it did not happen in 1940, if it happened in 1970, imagine, weapons are better. You have more nukes. There may have been more than 2 atomic bombs falling not just on Japan, but across the world. So I probably wouldn't do that. The second thing that came up to my mind is, oh, could I stop that guy from eating the bat? That sort of started this entire thing, and like, could I stop the pandemic? Surely there cannot be a knock-on effect of the pandemic. But then I realized that we are also living in a biological time bomb, where if you look at wet markets across developing countries, and if you look at forests that are there, you will see that it was just a matter of time before it happened. It was just a matter of time before there was a superbug that created a particular virus that ravaged humanity. And we all know the mortality rates of COVID. We all know the mortality rates of coronaviruses that have plagued us. The thing is, if it did not happen in 2020, maybe it would have happened in 2025. But if that bug was somehow worse, we would not have been equipped with the things that we have now. Faster vaccine technology, the fact that you have social distancing and so on and so forth, the fact that you have so much knowledge of a pandemic in the 21st century and how to handle it is the fact that, like, you end up probably in a better position and better suited to deal with the next pandemic. Which means that yes, millions of people have died across both the situations, World War II and the pandemic. But I wonder if I go and stop them, would the number go from millions to billions if I stop it and something worse happens overall? Then I thought, well, why am I thinking about all this boring stuff? Maybe I can do something fun. Maybe I can just go back in time, bet on every sports game that I know, and make myself a billionaire. I know that Euros was not coming home, and England were the favorites to win that. And I could bet on Italy. I could bet on Matilda saving a penalty versus Great Britain in the Olympics. And that's something that I could have done that would have made a lot of money. But what if that started a global financial crisis? I know this sounds wild. I know you're like, the betting company, global financial crisis, what? To be fair, the last global financial crisis started when people thought it would be fun to bet on houses. And that in and of itself was something that could have been difficult. At the end, just convincing you, I would not go back in time.
Thank you for that highly entertaining speech. I wonder if any of you guys can figure out what the prompt is. Anyone? Maybe? No? Okay, keep thinking. Our next speaker is Alicia Humphrey, again from Ursula Hall, and she's joining us again from Zoom. And she's muted. Alicia, if you can hear us. Everyone stand by. Alicia, can you hear us? Oh, wait.
Hi, testing.
Yeah!
Cool. Earlier this week, I was lucky enough to be on a Zoom with a lady called Debbie Spillane. Now, a lot of you probably don't know who she is, and I must admit, I don't know prior to Monday. Now, Debbie has been an ABC sports reporter for a number of years. She's worked in the media and she's now retired. But none of that is why I brought her up. The reason I bring her up is because 44 years ago, Debbie became the first female to ever umpire a game of cricket in New South Wales. Now, something you should know about me. I'm a cricket fanatic. I love it, I breathe it, I also umpire. So part of this Zoom was to understand what it had been like for Debbie, because it had taken 43 years since her very first moment out on that field, for there to be a female up there on the big stage umpiring in a men's test match. Think about that for a second. 43 years. 43 years of wondering if what you did, if the abuse you copped, if the rubbish you had to deal with was worth it. 43 years later, she now knows that it was. It was worth it to deal with the people who questioned why she was even there, because now we have this pivotal point where someone's done it. And I know we still got a long way to go. Don't get me wrong, I'm not that naive. But I think umpiring's a good example when it comes to how far we've moved in terms of feminism. It is putting a female in a position of power in a male-dominated environment. So what I'm trying to say here is that Debbie was lucky. She could live to see the validation of her efforts. But a lot of people don't. Think about it. I'm standing here today talking, having received a semester of university education because people have come before me. And so if I could go back in time, I'd let them know that it'd be worth it. We struggle in times like this with COVID to think about tomorrow. And yet these people, Emmeline Pankhurst, Debbie Spillane, worked for years, not knowing if there'd ever be a light at the end of the tunnel. I can't wait for the day that things like this are normalized, because to be frank, it still isn't normal, or it still isn't the norm to have a female cricket umpire, to have a female prime minister. But one day it will be. And when it is, I hope those people who worked so hard for that moment are there to see it. And if not, I wish there was a way we could go back in time to let them know that we value them, that we're grateful, because likely when they were doing it, all they were copying was abuse. And so I think if I could go back in time, I'd go back and thank these people who worked so hard, whose shoulders we stand on to have moments like this today. Thank you.
Amazing. So, back again from John's 23, John's 23rd, John's XXIII, we have Will She. Someone's already done that, so.
Well, the prompt is, in case anyone missed that part, if I could go back in time, and I'm sure you're going to hear plenty of answers tonight. Killing Hitler, probably. I don't know, stopping a war or another. Or maybe something more personal. And frankly, I can see why. In our lives, we make so many choices, and so many people have made so many choices beforehand. And of course, everyone's going to have regrets. Everyone's going to have something, whether big or small, that they wish could have gone differently. And it doesn't really matter what it is. It could be an exam, something so simple. Maybe it could be telling a friend they appreciated them more. Maybe it could be more simple. Maybe it's being there for a friend in their last moments. Maybe it's stopping a friend from doing something awful to themselves. There are so many, so tempting reasons why someone would want to go back in time. It's very easy to see why this would be a topic. I mean, why wouldn't it be? But I have to say, if I was at least offered the choice to go back in time, I don't think I would, frankly. Sure, we've all made all these choices in our lives, and they've had effects, good and bad. I'd like to think, personally, more good than bad, but these choices have had effects on people, have had effects on friends. My mistakes might have led to my friends growing into who they are today. What I've done good, hopefully, has helped better the people around me. And if I were to go back in time, does that not just invalidate everything I've ever done? Does that not invalidate the people I've affected? Does that not invalidate them, the people they care about? Does that not strike against what it very much means to live and be human and go about this day to day? If there is ever the choice to suddenly wipe away everything you've done, doesn't that just invalidate the very meaning of ever doing those things? Everything humanity has done, good and bad, everything we've conquered and strived towards, we're in a far better place now than, frankly, historically speaking, we've ever been. And that's only come with blood, sweat, tears, so much effort. Civil rights, technology, all these things have only come with so much effort. And if I were to go back, even to try and change it, even to make things better, doesn't that just throw away all the struggles all these people have had? All the sleepless nights, every bit of effort, bit of blood, sweat, and tears. Aren't I just throwing it away in the vain hopes that I can do something else? So I can make a difference? It's selfish, I feel. That just so I can make a change that I perceive to be good, I throw away everyone else. So if I could go back in time, I wouldn't. Thank you.
We are flying through these speeches. Love to see it. Vindication. All the time I spent yesterday typing out and multiplying things and adding things by 4. It's all working out. Our next speaker from Interhall is Miss Laura Johnson.
I didn't choose that song. That's very funny. My mates chose for me. All right. Okay. When I was 12, my little brother, Matthew, was 6. And he turned to me and he said, "Laura, did you know that shopping trolleys are following you? If you see a shopping trolley, it is the same one as before and it has been following you this entire time." Now, I've grown up believing my 6-year-old brother. And I am still to this day very hesitant anytime that I see a shopping trolley overturned in a creek or something. If I could go back in time, I would, but I'd train first so that I could be super sneaky. And when I say super sneaky, I mean that I would want to make sure that no one would see me. Now, I'm a 5th-year international relations student, and I studied international organizations a little while back. And when I was studying international organizations, we were looking at the UN and how sometimes they suck. And one of the case studies that we looked at was the cat drop of Borneo. Now, I don't know if you've heard about this. Basically, it's a case study in unintended consequences, how the best intentions of trying to rid Borneo of a certain plague of mosquitoes ended up with tons of cats being dropped from helicopters to save small towns. It was that example that reminded me that unintended consequences exist and that I need to be incredibly aware of them. So if I was to go back in time, I would, but only if I could guarantee to myself and to everyone else that no one would see me and that I wouldn't cause extra harm. Couple of situations that I might go back to. When I was in 2nd grade, I told my friend Damasha Panagoda that Santa wasn't real. I would go back to then. Or I could do the classic. I could go back to before the Australian bushfires and I could warn people about what was about to happen. Or even before the COVID pandemic and warn them. Or I could go back to when I was 12 and my little brother was 6 and he convinced me to be scared of every single shopping trolley that I saw. Training first, but if I could go back, you betcha I would.
I'm never going to look at a shopping trolley the same way again. Our next speaker from Wamburn Hall is Will Guo.
All right. Well, as an impromptu speech, I'd like to start by saying that I'm really sorry. It's going to be rather unclear, it's going to be long-winded, it's going to be poorly communicated, which for us, ANU students just hits a bit too close to Echo's 360. Or especially for those watching it on YouTube. I mean, my God, that's just like a lecture. But at least I'm not a hologram from 2018. At least I don't think I am. But that leads on. If I could go back in time, I think I'd really like to go back to 2018. It's my first year in ANU, and it was a more lively, more homely place. There's actually food on campus that's affordable. But the thought of getting a beer under the trees in Uni Avenue and watching the campus cats fight, that's something else that we just don't have anymore. That was a simpler time. We missed lectures, not because we couldn't, go to it, but because of sheer laziness, as God intended. But I guess in a way, everyone's nostalgic for a simpler, happier past. And it was a time when the Earth was healthier, and there wasn't this whole catastrophic death, plague, climate change, disease, and whatever the hell they call government on the South Side. Guess what I'm trying to say is, if I could go back in time, I'd really enjoy it more, and I'd really appreciate what I had and the life that I had. But you can do that now. Thank you.
All right, we're running slightly ahead of schedule, and I don't want anybody in the prep room to be robbed of their precious 10 minutes of prep time. So we're going to wait, and I promise you, I'm telling the truth this time. We're going to wait 3 minutes, and then we will continue. So if anyone would like to purchase something from the canteen, I know potentially we may have some takers. Now is your time. From Griffin Hall is Thomas Willingham.
Time travel is kind of fun because I actually reckon that the vast majority of things we hear in popular media are like, I'd go back and alter world history, or, I would fix the nuclear crisis in Chernobyl before it happened. To be honest, I don't trust myself to go back and alter world history in a way that is beneficial. What would I do instead? If I go back in time, I would try and correct the multitude of small mistakes that are made every single day. And look,
we accept those, right? Because it's who we are. It's being human. But at the end of the day, humans are kind of bad to each other, and in ways that are often out of our control, right? Like, for instance, as someone who, in multiple situations doesn't understand social cues, you can easily accidentally cause offense to people without ever intending to, without ever meaning to, without ever having any intention to do that. How does going back in time help? Well, I think the easiest way to circumvent the whole problem of like the grandfather paradox and what happens if I interact with the past version of myself and what's going on, I'm going to limit myself to going back like a couple days, right? And just insert myself back in my own timeline to fix stuff, right? To sort of go, okay, that didn't go so well, let's have another go. There's a couple of video games that exhibit this concept, like Overwatch in the context of like 30-second increments. What does that do? Where does that get me? Well, the first thing is what I've already mentioned, right? People do bad things. I'm a person, I like to fix that stuff. The second thing, though, which is perhaps slightly more interesting, actually, is that it means that you pursue life in a way that just takes risk as like whatever, right? Because if you're like, yeah, I'm going to take this risk, I'm going to do this sketchy thing, I'm going to do this thing that like, who knows if it's going to go well? Maybe things will blow up, but maybe I'll be really happy. If you're like, I'm in the middle of like, as actually happened to me recently, sort of saying, okay, I'm in the Daintree, I'm about to get into a sea kayak. The sea kayak is like a little small, but it'll be fine, right? It'll be great. And it was great, we went out and we saw the turtles and that was great. Except it was probably a little too small, ended up in significant pain in the way back. Turns out the world is not made for people my size. But the point is, if I get into a kayak again in this world, or on a kayaking experience again, in this world where I don't have the option of resetting all of my mistakes, I'm going to be like, last time I did this, that didn't go so well. I'm probably not going to do it. That's not a good thing though, right? Like, obviously, for someone like me who's aware that that would probably happen, that I am larger than the world was built for, yeah, probably what I need to do. But wouldn't it be great if I actually could say, you know what, if it sucks, if it hurts me, I'll just go back in time, I'll just fix it, I'll just be like, my friends can go and do this, I'll do something else fun for the day. So if I could go back in time, I would fix little things. I wouldn't try and fix big things. I wouldn't try and become the arbiter of history. I wouldn't have thrown that pen on the floor. I would attempt to fix the little things that occur every single day, that cause little problems, that cause misunderstandings, and I would make my life better, and hopefully the life of the people around me better. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to put the pen back, so I don't know why that's there.
Moving speedily along, our next speaker is Joaquin Cross from Bergman.
The question is often asked, what would you do if you could go back in time? What would you see? What would you do? And possibly, what would you change? Personally, I would love to see maybe the moment the dinosaurs went extinct and behold that moment in time. Or perhaps a famous speech by Cicero. I'm sure he could teach me a thing or two. But what would I do? Well, personally, I would do nothing. And instead of recounting the plot of Back to the Future to you, I want to tell you why the past, as it is, or as it was, and as it happened, is perhaps one of the greatest miracles to ever be. My mum works with a man whose grandfather was conscripted into the Nazi army, and so desperate was he to win a drinking game the night before his deployment that he burst his bladder and was hospitalised. The ship carrying his platoon was torpedoed a few days later, and there were no survivors from that event. I have no idea if in some remote hut near the dawn of civilization, one of my forebears was equally caught up in the moment that he accidentally allowed me to be. Perhaps we get too caught up in wondering what we could change about the past that we forget to be grateful for all the silly mistakes and all the moments that we enjoyed and all the things that we did in the moment just to live in the moment. The reason why we shouldn't concern ourselves too much with what could have been is that the possibility of us being here in this room as we are is so infinitesimally small that we need to be grateful and we need to be thankful that somebody made a silly decision and that perhaps if we could see it, we would do things differently, but not change it because we have no idea what that could lead to. And whether it be just a drinking game or something much, much bigger and much more serious that we could see and learn from, or even just behold, like the moment dinosaurs went extinct. See, the past is what it is, and always should be. It is a beautiful thing to behold and learn from and see. And it is the reason for you and for me. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Our second last speaker for the evening, rejoining us again from Zoom, is Satara from Bruce. Apologies, everyone.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. All right. If I could go back in time and admit something about my younger self, it would be this. When I was young and used to hear the word heroism, I often thought of people like Princess Diana or Emma Watson, people with huge lives who took time out of their busy schedules to visit impoverished communities very different from their own to make a difference. People who carried children who were malnourished as photographers snapped timeless pictures, and hence my childlike understanding of who a hero was made me want to do the same. To go back in time and reverse all the injustices of the world through one service trip. The photographs of people's happy faces on Instagram, going back in time on hashtag Throwback Thursdays to Timor-Leste, as they posed with children from disadvantaged communities in Asia, made me want to purchase a plane ticket and do something good for the world. Build a house or a well with my bare hands. However, this dream of mine was quite shattered when I came across the story of a tourist group who had gone to do the very same. As part of a building program, they were sent to build a school in a village. However, each day after they worked, in the night, the locals in the village relayed every single brick that had been placed during the day because it had been done wrong. Another story recollected when working in an orphanage in Uganda, there was a lack of safeguarding precautions. Volunteers had no background checks, and some were even accommodated in a room in the same building as the children. The man who said this story said that if he could go back in time, he would highlight just how unjust this system of service and aid was. Such stories ironically opened my eyes to how blind I was, going back in time to when I was younger, thinking I was qualified enough to do something which others could do much better than me. Volunteerism is a huge attraction for many people. However, we need to reconsider the way in which we give aid to others. The cost of a plane ticket to a developing nation as part of a Habitat for Humanity project could be enough to fund clean water for months in a community. Or it could be money used to fund builders from that nation itself, encouraging autonomy within these communities and self-sufficiency, to simply do a much better job. We don't need to go and build houses in communities with our limited experience in construction when these places already have people more qualified who are actively seeking work. If we do want to help, then we must utilize the skills that we already have. For example, if you have good speaking skills, raising awareness within your own communities about issues that you are passionate about. If you have good computer skills, creating websites to collect funding and further raise awareness about such communities. So now, if I could go back in time and consider who the heroes really were of the past, it's not the Princess Dianas and Emma Watsons of this world necessarily, but it was those who utilised the skills that they had in the countries they already lived in, who worked behind the scenes. People like Mary Seacole, the British Jamaican nurse who set up the British Hotel behind the lines during the Crimean War. Yes, we don't have the power to reverse time and undo the injustices of the past. However, we can still be heroes, but more effective ones, by staying where we are. Thank you.
All right, how are we feeling? One more speech. We feeling good? Okay, our final speaker for the evening is Evan Menezes. I'm really sorry again. Evan from Uni Lodge.
Right our wrongs, build a new future for ourselves with knowledge of the future. And I'm not ashamed to admit, it's something I think about often. Time is a peculiar thing. It's passing constantly, yet we do not seem to notice it. Then we get old and we realize that it was there all along. Ladies, gentlemen, NBs, I turned 19 recently. I've been thinking about age, the passage of time, and what it means to get older. Because, well, to be honest, growing old is a hard thing to do. Your body fails, becomes decrepit. Your identity slips through the cracks. Parts of yourself are lost in the sands of time. There is nothing quite as erosive as the power of time on a person and their surroundings. You fade. Sometimes you lose part of yourself and who you were. It is not an easy thing to endure. Say. Oops. So, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, if I could go back in time, if I could stay young, I'd do this, I'd do that. I'd tell my parents I love them more. My friends, I'd tell them how much they mean to me. I'd laugh more and I'd cry often. I'd run more. I'd smell the flowers a little bit. I'd stand in the doorway for just a little bit longer at a friend's house, knowing that I wanted to stay just a little bit longer because only with foresight do I realize how little time I have left with them. I'd cherish my time just a little bit more. I'd value the little things with rigor. The little tics, the little journeys to the grocery store, buying snacks at the supermarket, watching movies with friends, little social groups, drinking, going out. If I could go back in time, I'd value that more. I'd remember what it means to be human. I'd remember what it means to be myself if I could go back in time. I'd be ecstatic about that, about just being alive, just the nature of it, just being with people, just living. Because, ladies, gentlemen, NBs, it is only with foresight that we can understand how precious what little time we have left is. There's a story that gets passed around from time to time that I hear about a monk and his cup. So there's a couple, and they go traveling every now and then because, well, they can afford it, unlike me. And on their travels, they have the good fortune of meeting a monk. And this monk, he has a favorite cup, which he keeps on his bookshelf. And one day, the couple is talking to the monk, and they say, "Oh, well, you know, what's so precious about this cup?" There's nothing special about the cup, it's just a normal glass, for anybody wondering. And the monk picks up the cup, and he says, "I love this cup. It holds water well. When I hold it up to the light, it shines beautifully. It refracts into a rainbow as it passes through the glass." And he says, Anyway, so there's a monk in his cup. Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame.
Finish the
Sorry,
story
everybody.
about the monk and his
Oh,
cup.
okay, sorry. So the monk has this cup, and he's holding up the cup, and he says, I love this cup, but even as I hold it, I know that one day it will break. One day it will shatter into 1,000 pieces, and I will never see the cup again. It will never hold water. It will be nothing but a bunch of broken glass shards on the ground. And he says, with this retrospect, my time with this cup becomes more valuable. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could go back in time, I would say, choose your regrets. Choose the person that you want to be. Choose... Sorry, my bad. I'm out of that. Okay, I'll just wrap it up. Sorry, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much, Evan, for that highly entertaining final speech. All right, so we just have some people frantically adding up the scores. Hopefully we should have everything announced within, we want to say like 10 minutes, maybe, so stick around. Thank you. Right, thank you everyone for your patience. You just witnessed firsthand what happens when arts reps try to do maths. All right, so we have Nicole announcing our third, second, and first place. So I'll just hand it over to her.
Just really quickly before I announce the winners, I just wanted to give a shout out to my fellow judges who helped today. We're from the University Toastmasters Club, and if you can't tell, that is a club where you can develop your public speaking skills. So we meet every Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30 on both Zoom and on campus. So please come and approach us if you're interested in coming along to one of our meetings. And now, for what you've all been waiting for, announce the winners. So in third place, we have Griffin Hall on 148 points. Second place, Ursula Hall on 169.34. All right, now what we're really waiting for, first place on 170 points goes to Fenner Hall. Congratulations, Fenner Hall. And I'd also like to shout out to everyone who took place in this competition. I give you a kudos because public speaking can be really difficult. And again, if you'd like to improve your public speaking skills, please come along to one of our meetings and we'll be very glad to give you some pointers. Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much everyone for coming. I'd just like to say that there was a point margin of I'm doing maths again, this is bad. So the margin between second and first place was 0.66 points. So it's been an exciting evening. Thank you everyone for coming along. Special thanks to our speakers and to our judges.
Throughout the years,